Islamic psychology is not something that would just merely discuss religious experiences. What is the correct way to deal with people? Is not adding, sprinkling the Quran on top of a cognitive behavioral intervention. This is not religious psychology at all, and how they can be healed. I get asked, what is Islamic psychology? A lot. Some of it is from well-meaning people that just never heard of it. Some of it is from clients, as Islamic psychology is also something that can be applied in the clinical field. It is not only a part of theology. And some of it is a bit more polemic in tone, meaning, why do we even need an Islamic psychology at all? There is already psychology, right, that works for everyone. So I thought of starting this channel trying to explain, in my experience, what I have found Islamic psychology to be, and why can that be something interesting and worth knowing more and discovering. So first of all, Islamic psychology is not something that would just merely discuss religious experiences. Islamic psychology is not, for example, just the study of how do you feel during prayer, or how Muslims simply should behave with each other. It is much more than that. Islamic psychology is an explanation of how the inner part of the human being relates to everything around it, to the cosmos, right? How do we feel and why do we feel a certain way in nature? How to relate to that? What is the correct way to deal with people? Why do we feel anger, envy, unsettled, low self-esteem, and how for it to get better? In other words, Islamic psychology has something to say to the whole kaleidoscopic, vast amount of things that make up the human experience. Not necessarily the Muslim experience, because Islamic psychology does describe very well also the situation in which many non-Muslims might find themselves. Current society, post-modernity, capitalistic world. It has a lot to say about these very important topics. As for the behavioral side, Islamic psychology would work a lot, for example, with issues such as struggling with anger. Anger in Islamic psychology is something we give a lot of attention towards. It's not categorized in Western psychology as a disorder, anger, right? But in the Islamic tradition, we tend to pay a lot of attention to the channels that are proper and improper in which anger is expressed. Any other sort of behavior, functional and dysfunctional. In other words, Islamic psychology is a complete science. It is not just the religious side of Western psychology. Islamic psychology does not need any other psychology at all because it's already a psychology. It's not adding, sprinkling the Quran on top of a cognitive behavioral intervention, right? Which is a very common misunderstanding. Some people say, okay, I want to go to therapy, to a Muslim practitioner, and I want them to do exactly what my non-Muslim practitioner does, whether it is trauma process, cognitive behavioral, psychodynamic, schema therapy, but make sure that it's halal, right? Or add some Quranic stories, or just know that, we pray 5 times a day, so they are not gonna discriminate. And to that, I would say, please don't be afraid to desire something a little bit more compatible with who you are. And Islamic psychology is there to do exactly that. It's its own thing, starting with the theoretical side, meaning, what is a human being, right? Every psychology starts by answering this question. So we had in the ancient Greek philosophers that sometimes you would see in History of Psychology 101, right? The courses always start from the ancient Greeks believed that man had a body, a mind, and a soul, right? We all know this, and then going on in the centuries, it became just a body and a mind, and nowadays with extreme reductionism, there is just a body. The mind is just an effect of a body acting, right? So Islamic psychology starts by not having to follow these ideas at all because it has its own. So we would have external and internal components of the human being interacting all the time. So the body is actually considered as one component of Islamic psychology, and we have our own ways to take care of the body, which inshallah we are going to be able to talk about later on in this channel. So internally, instead, we have a lot of things going on. We have a part of us that wants, that desires. That is the nafs. The nafs is the one that, we're going in the market and it's like, I want this, I want that, she has this, I don't have this. And this is the simplest form of it. But sometimes it's morally neutral, right? I'm hungry, I want food. Nothing wrong with it. But sometimes this can become problematic, right? It's for sure, you can understand how this is the door to envy, for example, or too many injustices. So we're supposed to take care of the part of us that wants with specific tools. Then we have the qalb, means heart. We're going to explain what it is. And this heart is the part of us that is really oriented towards something. So you could, for example, have your qalb, your heart, which at a certain point in your life is very much oriented towards religion. You feel that that's the thing that really matters for you. Or it can be completely oriented towards your career that really matters for you. Or it can be completely oriented towards comparing yourself to others, and therefore it becomes self-destructive. And we have ways and tools to take care of that. We have the aqal, rationality. It's fundamental to think straight and to think well for therapy. So underrated, right? But sometimes they call it in the West cognitive distortions. We have our own way to talk about this. But the way you think sometimes is setting you up for a disaster. So it's fundamental to take care of rationality and way of thinking. And then we have the ruh, the spirit, which is our direct connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Health means aligning and balancing body, nafs, qalb, aqal, ruh, right? If they're misaligned, if one part screams at a voice which is too high and the others can't be heard, or if one thing is too active and the other are deactivated, we have configurations that we might recognize and call them anxiety, trauma, just bad behavior, right? Even things that are not pathologized, but they don't make us feel happy. So in our tradition, we have so many tools to take care of this. For example, the whole framework of mara'id al-qalb, or sicknesses of the heart, is another way to say if your heart orientation, if your wants, if your desires, if the way you weight life, if your priorities aren't straight, you're gonna suffer. So here's the way for you to get help, right? And these many treatment tools, for example, Tazkiyah or purification of the self, only get good, positive, wholesome motivations to act. Abandon these other reasons that just make you, society, the world destroyed. And these are proper clinical tools. We're not at all doing the sort of like pray it away that sometimes gets associated with religious psychology. This is not religious psychology at all. It is not, for example, in some parts of the world there are these evangelical groups, right, that are against certain behaviors, and they try to just pray it away and get into cursive stuff. We never had this in 1,400 years of our tradition. Our tradition is based on rahmah, mercy, and deep understanding, not on coercion and not on control. Everything that ends up with those tools is not from us. And I believe that unfortunately, this tradition has been forgotten. So I have decided to make this channel as a sort of library, as a repository, where I'm going to upload videos on different topics, different tools, different experiences that we have in our everyday life as Muslims, and how these things relate back to the framework of Islamic psychology and how they can be healed. So welcome to this channel. Assalamu alaikum.